You must be so confused about what you saw. Don't be scared, my little bunny. Answers will be given eventually, but don't try to solve this puzzle only with the pieces you have so far. This is only the beginning. For I'm going to tell you a story of broken people, beautiful people. He is so sorry about what he did to them, but there's nothing he can do. Remember that. Safety and pills, Sophie. 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 Safety and
A portion of this episode is sponsored by Google. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where I wish I had a shadow man feed me when lights go off. Oh, no. What is this thing? Oh, you're a horrific monster. On second thought, maybe not. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Walten Files. For those of you who don't remember, the Walten Files is the analog horror series from Chilean creator Martin Walls, with a story that's gonna melt your brain and a sound design that's gonna melt your ears. A Apologies, headphone users. It's a story about the now defunct Bonds Burgers, an animatronic-themed restaurant chain founded by business partners Jack Walten and Felix. Through the first 2 installments of the series, we learned that these two men had a falling out, and that Bonds had been forced to close shortly after its opening due to some mysterious event called the Incident of 1974. Honestly, though, it feels more accurate to call this the Incidents of 1974, considering that this is the year of Jack's disappearance, his wife Rosemary's untimely death and stuffing into Shaw the sheep, and another woman named Susan Woodings winding up inside Banny the bunny. I mean, it was a busy year for the franchise. After the closure due to the Incidents of 1974, the animatronics were relocated out into the woods, where they proceeded to take the lives of a few more victims as they lay in wait for the return of the mysterious character named Sophie, a former caretaker of the Bonds Burgers facility that we briefly saw in the very first episode of the series. A person that the animatronics are particularly keen on getting their hands on, as evidenced by them killing Brian Stells because he, quote, looked like her. And as of last episode, that's where we left things off. Almost. There was one final video I hinted at towards the end of that last episode. By piecing together flashes of a URL left at the beginning and end of the Relocate project upload, we're brought to an unlisted video titled Lucky You, where we see... Wait, what is this? What is this? It's a clearly laid out timeline of events? I'm crying because I'm so happy. Also, watch the endoskeleton boogie down. If there was any lingering confusion about the order of this story, Lucky You is basically the teacher's answer key, and it confirms everything that we talked about last upload. However, there's still one major reveal here: the return of Sophie.
You must be so confused about what you saw. Don't be scared, my little bunny, for I'm going to tell you a story of broken people, beautiful people, safety and kills. Sophie.
This now pretty much marks Sophie as our main character. Remember, the first thing that we hear in episode 1 of the series is backwards text that gives us this message. You finally start to remember that old day. They will look out for you soon. This whole story from its opening moments has been an attempt to wake up long dormant memories inside Sophie's mind. And now we have a fuller picture of what's going on. Sophie was once a caretaker of Bonds Burgers. She survives a tragic accident or a Bon attack, something that would cause her memories to be locked away behind a gate of trauma and medication. So the question now is, what exactly are those memories that need to be unlocked? For that, we finally turn to episode 3, Bunny Farm, the last canonical installment in the series and the one where we watch as Sophie's memories come flooding back. The premise for this hour-long upload is that Sophie, now age 22, is playing through the old Bunny Smiles Incorporated arcade game Bunny Farm. Along the way, she's presented with her family's tragic backstory, forced to face literal corpses, to which she responds,
but that was very confusing.
Understatement of the year there, Soph. As she plays through the game, she taps into glitches and hidden files that provide us with massive lore dumps. These reveals ultimately break down into 3 major chunks. The first is Susan Wooding's audio log number 3. It's worth noting we've yet to hear numbers 1 and 2. Through this file, we learn that Susan was the engineer for the animatronics, the one that essentially built them. When they're found malfunctioning on opening day, well, this happens. This tells us a few things. First, that they begin to malfunction after Jack's disappearance, but before anyone actually gets stuffed. 2, it confirms what we suspected, that she is in fact the one inside of the Banny suit, and that she doesn't appear to have any family connection to the Waltens themselves. Interestingly, based on this teeny tiny text right here that's really tough to read, we see that she's still alive inside of the suit somehow, and that her stomach feels weird, which probably connects back to the Shadow Man feeding her when lights go off that we saw happen in the Relocate project. And finally, Susan's tape here brings up an interesting loose thread. Susan says this:
Chris left some hours ago, and Felix didn't even show up.
She mentions someone named Chris. Now, earlier in Bunny Farm, we see that Chris is the name for one of the saved game files on the arcade cabinet, but the name actually comes up even earlier than that. The first time we actually hear about Chris is way back in the first upload of the series, where Chris is the one that ultimately sends Brian Stells to the animatronic storage facility and ultimately to his death. It's hard to hear exactly, but Chris's name is definitely mentioned here.
Anyways, so Chris told me this place hasn't been working since about 78, 9.
So, could Chris be the identity of our Shadow Man? The one person who has a connection to the franchise since its earliest days and has survived to tell the tale, feeding the animatronics at night? It remains to be seen, but Chris is definitely suspect number 1. The second major chunk of this upload gives us the identity of yet another animatronic, this time Boozoo the Ringmaster. Bunny Farm is very explicit in showing us that a man named Charles has been stuffed inside of the suit, and that he's been missing since
714, missing Leo 714.
5 days before the restaurant's shut down. Some scary breathing and jump scares later, we get this line, a line that's only visible via the closed captions. I don't remember my face. Chris and now Charles are two major loose threads that we have coming out of this upload. We know that they're important to the story, but we don't quite know their role in any of this. Last is the most tragic chunk of the 3, which, you know, is saying a lot considering that we just went through 2 horrific murders. Through a series of redacted diary entries, we learn how Felix's marriage to his wife Linda falls apart, and how Felix has increasingly turned towards alcohol for some reason. His problems actually date back to 1964, 10 years before any of the Bonds Burgers drama started to kick up. In fact, they don't start pitching the restaurant idea until a year later in 1965 to a company called Cyberfun Tech. So it seems like trouble was brewing in Felix's life much earlier than most Walten file theorists suspect. But it all wouldn't fall apart until a fateful phone call when Jack asks Felix to take his 2 kids, Ed and Molly, to their school dance.
I need to stay at the workshop to finish the paperwork, and we'll see some taking Sophie to the dentist. We were wondering if you could pick him up for the event and take him home later. Sure, I can do that. Really? Yeah, sure. Oh, thanks a lot, man. You're a lifesaver, Felix.
Jack would soon find out that Felix would not, in fact, be a lifesaver. But before we get to how, you know what is a lifesaver? Our sponsor for this portion of today's episode, Google. Specifically, their password manager. Because sometimes the scariest thing after you isn't a possessed bunny animatronic looking to stuff you into a robot suit. Sometimes it's just people looking to get access to your information online. Did you know that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month? Yeah, I didn't either, but apparently it is. And I call that out just because online security is one of those things that we all don't tend to prioritize. Sure, we lock our cars, we lock our houses, maybe get security devices and hide our keys to protect our physical stuff, but what are we really doing to protect our digital stuff? You know, the really important things like access to our bank accounts, billing information, the keys to our online identities. Well, the first 2 steps in that process are 1, having strong passwords for your accounts, and 2, not reusing those passwords. Statistically, an average person has over 27 separate accounts to keep track of. That is a lot of information. And if you reuse passwords and one of those sites has a data leak, then all your information is vulnerable as one website dominoes into the next. But if you use a different password for each one, boom, the vulnerability stops right there. And look, I get it. It's just easier if you have 1 or 2 passwords that you rotate between. 75% of people get frustrated trying to remember their passwords, and so 66% of people tend to reuse them. But that's an issue. The loyalist of theorists out there will remember a few years ago when we partnered with real-life penetration testers to get a sense of what being a hacker is like in real life. And through those conversations, we learned that cybersecurity tends to boil down to one thing.
The problem that we run into in real-world scenarios is that people depend on convenience over security.
People reuse passwords because it's convenient, even if it's not all that safe. But with Google's password manager, you get both security and convenience, as Google creates unique, highly complex passwords for each of your accounts, protects them using their advanced security, and then automatically fills them back in when you need access. And because it's built into your Google account, it has the added convenience of making those passwords accessible across any device. Anyway, the reason I bring all this up is that I trust Google products to keep me secure. I mean, my entire life, and the lives of all our employees. This entire business really just depends on the security of these channels, which are literally accessed by a handful of passwords. And with Google, I feel protected, because not only are my passwords kept under their strict lock and key, but Google also notifies me each and every time someone tries to access my account, or anytime they find one of my passwords has become vulnerable. It allows me to stay secure without having to constantly worry about staying secure. So if you're interested in learning more about how Google helps protect your information online, visit g.co/saferpasswords. Easier option, link is in the top line of the description. Thank you again to Google for keeping me safe for the last decade and for sponsoring this part of the episode. Now, back to the fictional scary stuff. As you might have predicted, Felix, with his alcohol issue, is not fit to drive that night. Via the diary entries, we learned that Linda had a officially left him earlier that day, May 2nd, and after drinking more at the school dance, which I guess things were different at school dances back in the 70s, he gets lost on the drive back home and ultimately winds up in a horrific car crash that kills both of Jack's children, Ed and Molly. Terrified of what he's done and what he could possibly tell Jack, he buries the two kids as a cover-up for his action. This, in turn, is the memory that Sophie needed to unlock.
You must find them, Sophie.
This just got so much deeper than I thought, and now I think I know what's happening.
In the end, we clearly see Ed and Molly, depicted as two red children, rise out of the ground and possess their gray stuffed animal, Rocket Rabbit. Two children sharing one character. Wait, is Rocket just the Walten Files equivalent of Golden Freddy? Did everyone realize that Golden Freddy actually had two spirits inside of one suit before I did? What are the dates of this one? Walten Files, okay. Golden Freddy Spirit Theory. Okay, I was ahead of it by a little bit. And then Bunny Farm ends on that uplifting note. From here, we get one final check-in with our happy little animatronic family, a final sequence of jump scares, and that's it. A somber ending to an intense 3-video ride of horror and tragedy. And honestly, it's a pretty tightly written episode. In this one extended upload, we get a lot of the answers that we were looking for last time. Who is Sophie? Why is she important? What she's supposed to remember? Check, check, and check. We know all those things now. But for everything that it explicitly answers, Bunny Farm still leaves one of our biggest questions open-ended. The biggest being, where's Jack? His frantic phone calls to Felix the night of the crash asking about his children are, to date, the last time we actually see or hear from him. Sometime in the next month after those calls, he disappears, the robots start acting funny, the restaurant opens, Rosemary gets stuffed into Shaw, and things quickly close. But whether that's Jack getting stuffed into Bon, Jack stuffing himself into Bon, William Afton style, or him just literally disappearing out of grief and despair in a quest to find some way to bring his kids back, it's unclear. After all, someone caused the animatronics to go haywire before opening day of the restaurant. Could it have been Jack and his grief? Maybe. The evidence we have right now points to Jack being dead, or stuffed into the Bond suit like you might expect. In video 1, we get a brief glimpse of Jack's missing poster, which comes accompanied with a message of, "Let me out of here." And considering that Susan in Bunny Farm says that she's alive inside the Banny suit, stuffed people in this universe appear to be conscious inside of their animatronic prisons. For more proof of Jack's fate, though, look no further than the actual farm in Bunny Farm. You'll notice that even though the game in question is called Bunny Farm, the farm actually belongs to a character named Pete the Hippo. I guess Hippo Farm doesn't have the same ring to it. Anyway, during Sophie's playthrough, there's a lingered on shot of a plaque describing the whole area as being founded by a hippo named Bobby with two children, Johnny and Pete. Bobby, who's now deceased, year unknown, had promised to build the greatest barn ever. Later, this plaque changes to instead reference the deaths of Ed and Molly Walten, which by proxy would mean that Bobby, our dead hippo, is then the stand-in for Jack Walten, our dead or stuffed protagonist. Connected to that, who or what is Bon the animatronic bunny? It's easy to assume that Bon and Jack are one and the same. If the bunny-shaped animatronic rabbit foot fits, wear it, you know? But I'm just not convinced. On one hand, the Springtrap connection of a mourning father losing his mind and trying to put the pieces of a broken family back together is hard to deny. On the other, though, I just don't see Jack, a loving father, actively luring his loving wife Rosemary to her death in the guise of Bon. Plus, we get a few additional visual clues as to what might really be going on here. Throughout Bunny Farm, we get the merging and separating of Ed and Molly as these two red child spirits. We of course see them preparing for their school dance on the front steps of their house, and we see both of their faces multiple times around Rocket Rabbit, making it crystal clear that they're inside of that beloved toy. But in a weird couple of creative decisions, we also see them split out of Bon multiple times. During the night of the dance, we see the Bon player character wander around the school before passing behind a wall, and suddenly on the other side, we see Ed and Molly appear to hunt for their uncle. And during the final jump scares of the Bunny Farm video, we see Bon glitching with overlays of two child spirits, one boy and one girl. So is Bon responding responding to the presence of these two lost children? Are they inside of him? His murderous intentions born out of their collective rage? Again, just like we see with Golden Freddy over in FNAF Land, was Rocket just a glorified vessel to carry him from one body to the next? It's really unclear right now. Lastly, though, I want to talk about the identity of Charles. Is he a Walten? A Kranken? At this point, we have a clear idea of pretty much everyone else in the story. Jack, Rosemary, Sophie, Ed, and Molly are all one family. Felix was a friend and partner who ultimately separates from his wife Linda. Susan Woodings was an animatronic designer who just seems to be an employee kind of hanging out. But everything about Charles outside of his name is still a big question mark, despite him being one of the main focuses of Bunny Farm. That said, I think I have an idea about his role in all this. And the solution doesn't come in the form of secret unlisted videos or backwards text. It comes instead in the form of Martin Walls' other non-canon animated specials. Mixed into the release of the Walten Files is a pair of animated holiday specials. The Christmas special called Boozoo's Ghosts and the Halloween special entitled The Mysterious House. Both feature alternate versions of our beloved mascot characters. Both also start off as seemingly normal old-time holiday specials before becoming the corrupted nightmare fuel that you'd associate with this series. To quickly summarize, Mysterious House is about a pair of trick-or-treaters who fall victim to a group of serial killers disguised as versions of Bon, Shaw, Billy, and a bizarre new character called TVA. Boozoo's Ghosts, meanwhile, is a surreal remix of A Christmas Carol that puts Boozoo, our ringmaster, in the role of the rich miser Ebenezer Scrooge, and features a death scene where the censored face looks very similar to the contortions on Charles that we see throughout Bunny Farm. Now, I'm not suggesting that Martin Walls is lying about these being non-canon videos or anything. What I am saying, though, is that they might be testing out ideas or inspired by things that are canon to the actual story. And if that's the case, Boozoo being both a ringmaster, i.e. the head of a circus performance, as well as the stand-in for Ebenezer Scrooge, literature's most famous money-grubbing boss, seems to be an intentional choice. It implies that Charles was, in some way, a higher-up, a boss, maybe even the man supervising it all. Consider this. As is common with the series, there's one final hidden URL inside of Bunny Farm, with a piece at the top of the video and a second at the end. Following that link leads you to a video called Guilty, where we watch the tragic downfall of Felix, from an enthusiastic young boss with a dream to a substance abuser lamenting his actions. And it's in this video that we start to track the history of their company. Jack and Felix found Bunny Smiles Incorporated back in 1967, just two guys with a strange shared dream of bringing animatronic fun to the masses. But in 1972, they sell to a new company, Cyberfun Tech. Notice the logos and disclaimers on the title cards for all these videos. Felix even calls it out.
It's crazy how far we made it. Just everything, really. The Cyberfun Tech deal, the Bonds Burgers project, it's incredible.
And this is a part of the franchise's lore that's really yet to be explored. The need for Jack and Felix to actively involve a third partner, possibly in the form of whoever actually ran Cyberfun Technologies. A third partner who has monetary leverage to demand favors from one or both men to keep the business going in the direction that he wanted. This, I suspect, is Charles, the mystery face that lives inside of Boozoo. Hence that character being depicted as both ringmaster among the robots and as Scrooge in his animated special. It's my belief that we're gonna learn that Charles is ultimately responsible for Felix's mental collapse. Anyway, with a new teaser out for installment 4, we may learn these answers sooner than later. But at the end of the day, what I love about this series is that it's a story about human characters in a world full of animatronics, not a story about animatronic characters in a world full of humans. What makes the Walten Files such an intensely disturbing story is that it's a family tragedy. Sure, there's certainly terrifying imagery and sound design, but it's just set dressing for real people going through intensely horrific situations. Life, a lot of times, is scary enough, and that's all you need. The killer bunny robot? That's just the cherry on top. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.